I'm going to talk about PBM. And prior to PBM, I was in politics, not Rand Paul politics, but worked for Dr. Coburn, Frank Keating, and Don Nichols. And to get into a cleaner environment would not have been the PBM route. Politics was a 2-shower a day. PBM's probably just go ahead and take a shower every hour if you can. So the point of this discussion and discussions that I've done in previous months, one of my long-term clients at a former employer, talk about in a second, he continues to go up to conferences and say, well, I do business with Chad because he told me I could pick his pocket, or he could pick my pocket 14 different ways. Well, I love that endorsement. I think it's great, especially in a room full of PBMs. When I was preparing for a speech, the broker out of Seattle, and preparing for the last presentation back in May in Vegas, it's actually 32 now. And we're the same company. We were derived to process electronic benefits, give your card, you administer a deductible, a coinsurance, a copay, pretty basic. But it's become, every day I hear of a new PBM or a new way to process a claim, and it's really pretty basic at the end of the day. So when I'm talking about PBM, my question always is, and as I'm listening to any discussion, whether it's my children talking about something they did wrong or right, transparency, why should I care? So why should you care? Pharmacy is still a 20% component of your equation, typically. If you have Harvoni, and everybody go home and don't DVR through your commercials and listen and see if Harvoni is right for you. Everybody knows that you should go out and ask your doctor about Harvoni. My grandmother, who is now 90, back in the day saw these wonderful people frolicking on the river. They're having fun. She has rheumatoid arthritis. And she asked me, because she knew I was in the industry, Chad, and she's a little Welsh lady, shorter than I am, should I go ask my doctor about this drug? And it was for herpes. Now, she's a pretty aggressive little lady, but so let's take a voyage. Beautiful ship. Such a nice evening. People up on the deck. They seem so comfortable as the founders. And I did have theme music, but I'm too stupid to figure out how to make it play across the right slides. But the idea is that in today's environment, because we've been Blue Crossified and Aetna'd and Cigna and whatever, United, not United, we're looking at the top part, or top component. And when competing against other PBMs, my last PBM stint was with a company. I'm not one of the guys that jumps from company to company. I'm very much a longevity type guy. There's a joke there, Tracy. But I was there for 10 years. We were acquired and became a public company. And as I'm preparing for a proposal for a prospective client, I have to sit before a pricing committee. And they asked, and I'm not going to disclose the name of the company, but I almost did. I asked if it was going to be a transparent deal, as we were always fully disclosed. And the transparent component of that was denied. They would not do transparency except for a certain threshold of members. And that's ridiculous. When you're trying to sell this idea that you're fully disclosed, your relationships are based on trust. And they always are, regardless of the business. If you lie, it comes around. If you're honest and you trust, it ends up building karma points, hence Mike's introduction to the PBM industry and someone's question about is there a small PBM that does it right. Thank you. But the idea is, within a month, I was at Maxcare RX, because that transparency and disclosure should not be the exception. That should be the assumed. And I'm going to tell you what you should ask and what you can expect. And one of the refreshing things, and I'm not tooting Jay's horn, besides the picture with Dr. Schmidt, sitting down in a client renewal meeting, and he actually asked for a raise. And I'm like, you asked for a raise? And it was because everything was fully disclosed and transparent. And he did a good job, and he saved them a lot of money. Well, that just boggles my mind. Are you kidding me? You want to ask based on what you do, not based on some new relationship with the manufacturer on money I can hide? So we got to thinking and looking. So when I'm competing against Blue Cross, which is the dominant player in this marketplace and lots of other marketplaces, transparent deals don't really compare. Blue Cross Blue Shield, if you're a 10-life employer or a 1,000-life employer, you have a zero admin fee. That's called a traditional pricing model, where the PBM is retaining spread, meaning we contract for AWP, which doesn't mean anything. That's a whole nother hour-long presentation. But a price, we buy drugs at, let's say, 85% off on generics. We sell them for 70% off. The difference is retained in revenue by companies like mine. And that's one of the 32 areas. So now there's 31, and we'll talk about those in future. So when you're using a broker who also is not knowledgeable, and there's many in this room that are, you're using a broker that's not knowledgeable, they're saying, well, on the spreadsheet, you're a 0, your competitor's a 0, you're showing 16. How on earth could you show 16? Well, because all of my money is baked into a fee. It's not, you have to guess it, and then when you guess it, I'm going to put it somewhere else. That's what happened in the late 90s when Express Scripts and Medco, I did say their names, I'm on Express Scripts' do not hire list. I'm trying to figure out how to put it on LinkedIn. It's a badge of honor. But you have to identify where these areas are, and you have to ask these questions. And the thing I like about meetings like this is it elicits the idea of asking these questions of your brokers. And maybe in a perfect world, you're making those brokers better. Maybe they just don't know what to ask because companies like mine have encouraged them not to ask. Maybe on the flip side, they're getting paid. It happens. Everything has to be disclosed. You have to understand where the revenue is. See, you look at the various revenue streams right now on a traditional deal, I'm going to make money on both the markup on brands, generics, and most of the time these days, from a PBM standpoint, I'm making money in 3 areas. Generic markup, because everybody should have a generic dispensing rate above 80%. Everybody know what that means? So all of your claims, 80% should be generic at this point. If you go to a Walgreens, God help you, go to a Walgreens, they will change your drug out to a generic if there is a generic equivalent. That's not done because they want to save you money. That's done because they make a gigantic percentage of revenue on the markup on that generic. And the members' copays are very small, so the members are not going to complain. It happens a little bit more with high deductible health plans. So if you're paying a co-insurance, maybe the member starts to complain because they feel that some of the generics are still pretty expensive. Crestor, for a time when they had an exclusive period, when it first came out, it was an expensive generic. Recently, it's hit the floor. If you're on Crestor for some reason, because everybody has to be on something according to the commercials, you will go take generics. And Crestor is now cheap. It was $6 a pill, now it's $1 a pill or 50 cents a pill. So ask your doctor about Crestor, and I'm not paid by Pfizer on that one. But you still have the difference between what the pharmacy buys it for and what they sell it for to the PBM. So there's a whole nother component. We're owned by Oklahoma Independent Pharmacy, which represents about half of the pharmacies in Oklahoma. So think mom and pop, think grocery stores, think the little guys. And make no mistake, the little guys are doing okay. If they're still in business, they're doing okay. However, Walmarts, the big box stores, are really kind of crushing them from a margin perspective. They can buy a lot better than most of the independents can. But where PBM becomes even more nebulous is MAC. MAC means maximum allowable cost. It also means something different to every single PBM out there, all 200 or 500 or however many there are now. And it's basically the ability of the PBM to make the list of drugs that are cheap, either smaller or bigger, and they retain more money based on that list. So you have to understand, the best question you can ask, and this is good for the consultants too, what percentage of your generics that are being dispensed are on the MAC list? If it's above 95%, you're good. I mean, you're good-ish. If it's below 95%, you need to ask more questions because that list is being manipulated. You don't want a list that has 70% of the generics on their MAC list because that's not reality. So there's another question. $20 on your table, please. So as a PBM contract with a pass-through deal, as a PBM contract improves, that discount is passed on to you as an employer or a consumer on a pass-through deal. On a traditional deal, I make more money as it improves. And since most are traditional deals, most PBMs are making more money. Harvoni, when it was first released, and we're getting into rebates. When Harvoni was first released, there were no rebates. And it was a $180,000, $150,000 course of treatment. And it cured hepatitis C 94, 95% of the time. It didn't say that, oh, by the way, you can re-catch hepatitis C. So that's a whole nother line of questions. But then Gilead released rebates because a couple more products came on the market, one of which was Gilead's as well. And that rebate initially was quoted as 45% of that $150,000. So to Mike's point, what is the PBM's incentive on a non-pass-through deal, or Collins, actually, what's the incentive of the PBM to deny that claim? Harvoni was meant as an end-stage liver failure treatment. So if you're getting ready to have a transplant, transplants, self-funded guys, $500,000 for a liver transplant, not to mention the list and all the drugs afterwards. So $140,000, $150,000 seems pretty good compared to that. But it's not ready. It wasn't meant as you just got hepatitis C because you had a fun college time. It was meant as you have end-stage liver failure and it's cheaper than a transplant. But PBMs make 45% of the rebate. So what would be my incentive as a PBM to say, no, you can't have that Harvoni? 45% of the cost. That's one claim, that's one member. And specialty drugs account now for 3 out of 100 members, give or take. All of the research and development is in specialty pharmaceuticals. So think of that. Every time, our average cost on a generic prescription for an industry is probably somewhere in the $25, $30 range. A brand claim single source is $200 and up. Specialty claim averages $3,000 a month. And if you're a small employer without the right protection, right plan design, combined with the out-of-pocket max that's been thrown in there by our friends in Washington, your plan's going to suffer. And that member with the coupon programs is not going to have to pay out of pocket. And that's another problem. So the member doesn't pay anything out of pocket. The manufacturer pays the copays through assistance programs. And then once they reach that out of pocket, every other drug they take is free. The plan pays for it. Not necessarily the right approach. So rebates. They came about, I was working for PCS Health Systems back when that was a company, and I know I look like I'm 25, but I'm really old. And we were owned by Eli Lilly, and Lilly thought that they could make Prozac everybody's friend. So Prozac was going to be in everybody's pocket. Washington decided that there needed to be a larger firewall between the member, the PBM, and Prozac. So they started paying what were called rebates to encourage the use of this drug. They couldn't get it out, but they're going to encourage it through rebates to all the other PBMs. And then the marketing people, by the way, manufacturers, those commercials that we now TiVo, or that's not even a thing anymore. DVR, man, I'm old. Those commercials make a 10-to-1 return on advertising investment still to this day. So they do it. And that's why when you're going into a doctor's office, look for someone in a suit that's good looking. That's a manufacturer drug rep. Or short. Yeah, transparent. It's because your wife's at home. So the idea is, are they disclosed? So it's not just about the rebate these days. And Express Scripts, my not employer, they make gigantic rebates. Big, big, big. And rebates are paid. Think of it as the easiest way to portray this is if you're going to buy a new car and it's an expensive car, but the manufacturer is offering you incentives to buy that car. They're going to give you cash money back. They're going to pay tags. Maybe they'll give you free gas for a year. I don't know, whatever. That is paying down the net price of that car. It's the same thing with rebates. Rebates were brought on to, if you have 5 drugs that do the same thing, you're buying down the most expensive product to a level that's close to the other products. And then those rebates are paid to the PBM, who then, whether that's PBMs within the carrier or whatever health plan, they then share with the employers, right? Everybody has rebates, 100% false. The idea is to buy down that price. So that's where 3-tier copays came into play. That's why we have 3-tier copays. It used to be you have a brand and generic copay. Now you have 3-tier, where you have a generic, a preferred brand, and a non-preferred brand. And manufacturers figured out that if you have a $15 difference between the preferred brand and not preferred brand, you're going to choose the preferred brand. It's science. They did. I mean, really, they figured out, and they invested tons of money. $15 means that they're going to choose the brand, the preferred brand. And many times that preferred brand, especially if you're not getting all those rebates, is more expensive. If you're on a percentage copay, you're asking your members sometimes to pick a drug that's more expensive than alternatives out there. Not good. How do you address this? How do you, I'm over. So how do you address this? Access to data. Always push your carrier. If you're still with the carrier, run. But if you are still with the carrier, push them for data. Push your consultants to analyze that data. Not just to get you a better admin fee or discount. But if you don't have access to data, that should be, that's a problem. If they're not telling you where the data is or how to address it or how to navigate that, that's a problem. Why isn't PBM revenue disclosed? Why don't they share data? Well, because these companies are largely for-profit. They're most times publicly traded. If they share their data, they're doing a disservice to their shareholders who are driven by earnings per script. So it is truly the fox guarding the hen house. I don't know how I got here, but that's my world. So if we can be transparent and share, this is how much I make. And keep in mind, this is an admin fee. If I only make money on admin fee, it's a big admin fee. It could be $15 PEPM when you might be paying $0 now or more. But that just shows how much, and it all is based on claims. I only make money when claims process. I don't make money based on healthy belly buttons. So the sicker you get, the more claims processed, the more money the PBM makes. Why should I care about transparency? Back to the question that I'm asking my kids when I get home. Why should I care why you started that fire? Cameron, I was like, bail him out of jail at 10. You want the true discount of what's being contracted. Most PBMs use an aggregator. So it ends up boiling down. So we use United Healthcare as our 800-pound gorilla. So when I'm contracting, I'm not little engine that could in Edmond, Oklahoma. I'm contracting like United. Most PBMs, unless they're United, are contracting with one of those companies to provide those services. Because ultimately we want to focus on service and transparency. And they don't operate in that segment very well, but they can buy really well. So you want that revenue to be passed on. You want my discounts to be passed on. And if you're not getting a full pass-through deal, you should. I make less money. Truly, if someone's asking me for a pass-through deal and a traditional side-by-side, I'm like, well, what's the point? They are going to be equivalent, but think about it this way. As I get better on a traditional deal, my revenues go up. On a pass-through deal, they stay flat. So I have to quote it right to begin with. Does that make sense? Is this thing on? MAC is MAC. Whatever my list is my list. I'm passing through 100% of those drugs that are on that list. I'm not redefining that list. I'm not making 7 or 8 different MAC lists up. And it happens all day long. They make their own MAC. Hey, this MAC is for commercial with people on the left coast or right coast. They literally will create these lists on the fly. Complete disclosure, and despite the fact that I'm the fox guarding the hen house, I think it's the closest to an aligned incentive as there is. We're paid based on claims, based on you getting sicker. Electioneer, break it back to Ronnie. Trust but verify. This is towards communism, and last night made me think about communism again somehow. But it's the idea that you have to understand what you're being presented with, especially if you're paying. This dollar, Mike touched on a little bit, this 20%, there is very flat trend, and that's because generics have gone on the market significantly. And even though everybody makes most of their money on generics, the trend is going to go up. By 2018, most of and these trends are largely by the specialty pharmacy people, so they're kind of baking the system a little bit. These specialty drugs are going to account for half of your drug spend in the very near term. Harvoni is just the edge, the tip of the iceberg, back to the example. And there's 4 or 5 treatments for hepatitis C now. And you all look lovely, but hepatitis C is a dormant condition. I'm not asking you to run out and get Harvoni. I'm not asking you to go ask your doctor. There's many doctors in the room. But it presents itself at different times. And so a lot of these therapies are being developed for that because they know that, one, you have the out-of-pocket max because of the ACA and manufacturer assistance programs, and you also have giant amounts of revenue to incent that. Data is the key. I know a small PBM that can analyze your data. That's the only sell statement I'll give today. But it is about data, and all electronic data is the same. Regardless of who says what, I guarantee you that Blue Cross is sophisticated enough to give you electronic data. But is it their willingness, or will it show under the skirt? Bad example. And this is I've been at this company for 6 months. I've been in the industry for, I think it's 20 years now. I think the bio is wrong, but the idea is to keep it simple. We're a very complicated industry. There's 32 ways I can pick your pocket. I check your wallets. I may have already picked your pocket. But it doesn't have to be complicated. It can be simple. It's still going to be expensive, but work with the right partners, analyze the data, and be prepared for it, because specialties here. Biosimilars, one last comment, and there may be questions. Biosimilars are now, there's 3 approved, and biosimilars were supposed to be the generics of the specialty industry. Well, the specialty drugs are expensive, and it's about a 15% break from the specialty price. So biosimilars are going to be expensive too, and there's 250 that have been approved in Europe. So that wave is coming. It's just a question of how quickly those biosimilars are approved here. Yes, it's a break in price from specialty, but it's still extremely expensive. There's a treatment for disease states, orphan drugs. Address your specialty copay now. If you're non-grandfathered, address it. If you are grandfathered, ask your broker if you should be. You have to be able to keep up with what's coming. And that's not trying to scare you, but it's reality. It is happening now. That's it. Questions?
I have two questions. When you're completing RFPs for employer groups looking for a pharmacy benefit manager, traditionally many of these plan sponsors rely on an independent insurance consultant, fee-based consultant, to go through the proposals and make a recommendation. In your experience, what percentage of those consultants know what they're doing? And that's the first question. And the second question is, do you see a trend amongst plan sponsors of completely eliminating specialty drugs from their program?
I'm sorry, guys. As a percentage of people that understand pharmacy, it's very small. I struggle myself as someone that's supposed to know what's going on, and I hear of a new game or a new program about every week. So from a fully insured broker that's used to fully insured, I would say it's not very high percentage-wise, maybe in the 10% range from a pharmacy perspective. They may trust someone and they may find we're not the only trustworthy vendor out there. There are others that are trustworthy to levels of trust, I guess. But I think they're all challenged by data that they've received and maybe what they don't know. To answer your second question, specialty pharmacy, yes, I've seen carve-outs. And if you're giving, Colin and I, actually, there's a tip me later, we're talking about specialty pharmacy, and if I'm getting 100% pass-through, or I'm passing through 100%, I have no bias as to what's being dispensed. If I'm not retaining a margin on specialty and I'm not getting rebates on specialty, I'm ambivalent, right word? Ambivalent on what I dispense. I'm only looking at clinical, and I'm deferring to the plan on how you all want to set it up. Right. So that's, and I see some PBMs out there that are rubber stamping these specialty products when all that's doing is driving up their revenue and driving up your costs. Yes, there are some that are excluding it. There's a minimum essential coverage component to that. I don't know that that's the right approach. I think you just have to manage it correctly and have the right stop-loss partners. Does that answer your question? Okay, great.
In reference to rebates, I know that the different levels of drugs, I'm sure, have different percentages of rebates, along with the different express script groups types out there that do that. Is there a place that there's usually always a place to find some information? Is there a place to find some information on some general rules in reference to that?
I can send you numbers, and most consultants will send you general numbers, but the biggest secret sauce component of our industry is 1, rebate agreements, and 2, MAC lists. Those are highly retained numbers. What I can assure you, when I got on the scene in the PBM world in a legal department in Scottsdale, Arizona, they said that rebates were going away, and as of today, they've about tripled. And that's due to specialty pharmacy. Think of it the same 20% rebate, give or take, but it's on 20% on a gigantic drug. And even though it may be 1 out of 100, it's a gigantic drug.
I know with some larger entities I've seen working around on some things, government-type entities, there's some fine forensic accounting work that goes on that even hides them from the constituency.
For sure. And it's managed at many times on the NDC or the drug level to feather, the term feather the MAC. So if I have a guarantee that's at 81%, I'm going to make that guarantee as a PBM that's not disclosing things, because I'm just going to adjust the per claim price. Big carriers do it all day long, and we see it from the independent pharmacy perspective. They may get clawbacks on drugs and go upside down on claims where they're paying more than they actually can acquire it for. And so you see some independent pharmacies say, we can't dispense that, because what they're saying is, I can't afford to dispense that. And so there's battles going on between the big PBMs and pharmacy nonstop. they're all richer than I am, so it's kind of a high-class battle, but it's still not above board.
So I'm a rheumatologist, and so I deal with a lot of the very expensive drugs. And one of the things I've noticed over the past year is that I have visitors coming in from these specialty pharmacies who want to speak to me and my staff, and that's a very new phenomena. And I think part of it is because of what you're describing. So I guess I'm interested to know, in order to make sure that I'm protecting my patients and making sure they're getting what they need, and then also protecting the employers and people who are really paying the bill, is there a question or two that I should be asking and making sure I'm asking? Because it's all this, we're thankful for your business, and everybody's happy, and I want to make sure I'm asking the right question. And then secondly, I did have a patient in her mid-50s who's now run up against this lifetime max with respect to her medicines. She's a rheumatoid. She's been on biologics since they've become standard of care, which is now late 90s, really, or early 2000s. And she's now at the lifetime max with respect to medications. Oh. And at least that's what her insurance is telling her. And so I just was going to get you to comment and see if you've seen that yet.
Yeah, the pharmaceutical reps are basically the lobbyists of our industry, so everybody sees a problem, even if you're a Republican, a Democrat, independent, Tree Party, whatever. Lobbyists are the people that continue to be there. If their politician gets kicked out, they go to the next one. The drug reps are basically the same entity. They're in there promoting, and the doctors, you're dealing with lots of different variations of how RA impacts people, and then psoriatic arthritis and some of the other. And they're the people providing information because, especially from an internist perspective, you want to see as many patients as possible because you're getting paid on those. So you want to get as many people through, not the people in this room, those other guys. But so I would just be wary of the clinical, and you have to do a lot of due diligence to see, are the clinical outcomes significant enough? Because you don't necessarily understand costs. They're all expensive. Anything that's going to treat RA is going to be expensive. There are levels. Believe it or not, Enbrel used to be super expensive. Now Enbrel is kind of a cheap drug compared to Humira or some of the others. So ask those questions. From a plan perspective, I'm not an ACA expert. There's many in the room. But I was thinking that there was some, it depends on their plan, I guess. But I don't know that they can institute a lifetime max. Insurance professionals, I've never seen that on drugs after the ACA was passed. It probably, I'm guessing she's with a fully insured carrier of some sort, so they're definitely not wanting to dispense that anymore. So I would dig into that a bit, especially if it's a necessary drug. I'd be concerned that that's not accurate.
I'm another rheumatologist. So my question is, some of the drugs I've been using for years that patients of mine with no insurance could buy for $30 here in the States now are going up to $200 or $300. And one in particular, Plaquenil, has been around since 1945. So now you're getting $200 to $300. So typically when these things come up, I go to the Canadian pharmacies and see what the prices are up there. And in this case, and in many cases like this, where these generics have been around forever that are going through the roof, I can still get my patients to go through the Canadian pharmacies for $30. So the question is, if I'm running a pharmacy, why can't I buy those drugs at the same price that I can keep them driven down to a $30 price in the United States? Why is that? Well, how is it that those prices are uniformly being driven up?
Because pharmaceutical manufacturers are greedy. I mean, you see all of the people, the Valiant, the folks that are marking up HIV drugs that have been around forever, 600, 700%. And in the US, pays for the research and development for the world. So when Harvoni came out, you could go to Egypt. What was the example, Jay? You go to Egypt and get it for $900, and it was 150 grand here. Now, the accommodations at that time in Egypt were not super strong. Bullets and bombs and whatnot. But yes, we're paying for research and development. And, and the manufacturers get off a little bit with that because there are laws against importation of drugs, whether it's Lipitor back in the day when Michigan congressmen would take their seniors across the border to go buy Lipitor. Technically, it's still illegal. It's not enforced. There are ways around it. It's wrong. Free market should be able to apply pressure to that, but they're taking these old generics and pricing them up beyond, many times because they know they have an out-of-pocket max and the member's going to stop squawking after a bit. And that's
if I'm you sitting in your spot, why can't I buy it at a price that you could give it to for $30 and help the? I mean, what's keeping because something's keeping the Americans from being able to get the same price that the Canadians are.
Pharma. They have their lobby. Is extremely big, and it doesn't matter if you're a donkey or an elephant. The parties we have, they're applying pressure to those politicians to not allow that. What I can assure you is that we can show you, we're not mail order. By the way, there's another comment. Mail order, don't do it. Mail order drives up rebates. They're bigger than retail rebates, and the PBM is making gigantic amounts of money. There's no, unless you're offering 3 times the retail plan design, that's another $20 on the table. Unless it's 3 times the retail plan design, you're not going to save money. It's not a silver bullet. It costs money. What I can tell you, though, is we have tools to show you which pharmacy is going to provide it for the least amount of money, working within the laws of how they're established right now. It's not right. There should be some kind of pressure from the international community to spread that research and develop. If the pharma needs to make money, they need to be transparent too. And it is a lengthy process to get a drug approved, but spread that cost around the rest of the free world. One more question.
The reason you see the drugs being less expensive in Canada is the stuff that we're talking about here today, because the free market is at play. Individual people buy their drugs in Canada. People think they've got universal health care. They buy their drugs with cash rather than copays, rather than having all this junk behind the scenes that we're talking about. That's why. I mean, I worked on as a TPA with a TPA in Canada that administers plans, right? So that's why. Unless you get into really expensive drugs there, where government assistance is available to people, you pay cash for your drug. So that's why it's cheap. I mean, it's pretty simple. It really is that easy. Thank you for this. This is exactly the problem that a lot that people don't understand. There's so many different hidden layers to the pharmacy benefit world that there's so many fingers in the pot. It's ridiculous. And there has been a lot of legal research, and I think that the import of drugs from Class A countries, Canada, New Zealand, Australia, Great Britain, it's gray. It's gray at best. So, I mean, it's possible, but
yeah, gray works to the advantage of whoever's trying to define it. And in a political season, nobody's going to try and define gray. That's where we live. Okay, thank you guys.